Now, before I go back to the dynamic routes, I again want to go back into our project part. So remove all the console logs that is the part and parcel of this for the understanding that we had. So we will remove this, we will remove this. This is where we start using our JSON server file. So now in this page, we have home. So how should our home look? Right? We have our header, we have our footer. Now the home page, I want 3 sections. So let's have first of all a section, or basically a fragment. Okay, this is our fragment. Pretty sure it will not give an error. Now here we will have 3 sections like this. It will be home, it will be about, and finally it will be contact us. Now inside this we will have an ID of, well, hash about and contact. Let's also give a background of red, which is 700, a height of screen. Same I will do here as well. This will only become green and this will only become, say, blue. This is our home page. This is our about page. This is our contact us. So we have defined 3 sections here with the ID, and in our header we have these links. Make sure that you change this. Now we can test whether it is working or not. For some reason it does not work. We will look into it why that is the case, but for now let's design our home page. So the home section is basically something that I would like to have in this manner. Like here, if this is our home, right? I want it to have some sort of like a text area here, which will have one text, some sort of like a text here, then some big text here, and then there's has to be some sort of like a CTA maybe, which can be a read block, and here can be some sort of like featured article or something. Like we can have a main featured article, and then we can have like a read more and all of that. So let's see what we can do. Inside this section I will have like 2 div elements. In one div element I will have first of all I will need this heading. Let's try the bard, because why not use the bard. Now I want here is give me some heading for, give me some sort of like a heading for catchphrase for my blog website, which is going to be acting as a CTA. Let me just say, give me the landing page title and subheading with a CTA for my blog website. Find meaning and purpose in your life, discover your passion, connect with others and make difference. We are not connecting with others. Subscribe to our blog and get it. Okay, let's do that. Let's go here like so. Then we will have a paragraph, which will be basically, the paragraph can be this. We don't need this. Then we can have a button, and that button will be this. Okay, let's see how it will look. This is how it is. And we don't need this. What we need here is some sort of like flex. Now maybe I don't need that sidebar. Maybe I can just have, you know, as simple. Yeah, let's go with the simple one. Let's not do the sidebar and all of that. This should do it. So now what we have is flex goal, justify, center, items, center, items start rather than center. Also, I will say the H is basically the screen. That should do it for now. Maybe let's go with the full. The class name here is going to be 6XL. I want it big. I want it to be bold, and that should do it. Then we will have class name here of text XL. Font is semi-bold. Okay, text color should be slate 950, yeah, 900, and here I can say the text color could be 700. Not text color, text slate, and the XL can now be like 2XL. Let's put it that way. The button is going to be somewhat like a tricky one, so it will have a BG of slate 950, text of slate 50, px of 4, py of 2, so we can have a px of say 8, py of 4. Then we will also have a rounded of md. Now at the end we will have this as center as well. Here I will have mb of maybe 2. Now this button has to be a decoupled a lot more than that, so This entire section, I will need it to have a py top and bottom of 8. Cool, it is working good. And maybe we can have like some sort of like a height here. So let's call this as 96, and that works fine. 96 is fine. Okay, the next thing that we can do is make this as slate of 950 and text of slate 50. So that will do the trick. Now, the problem with this applying, here, is because this whole thing is inside our container, which is inside our layout, right? So the best thing that we can do is this. And like the header, like that, we can actually come to this part, and this is now working fine. Now what we can do here is that this segment can be wrapped around container, and that will do the trick for this segment. Similarly, we can have this here container with the about. Cool, it is now working. Similarly, we can have the container here as well. Okay, the about us. Now let's go back to our board. Write me some about us for the first option. The name of the site is crafter. Okay, now let's go and do copy paste. So this will basically be h2 now for the, because we can only have one h1 in our entire site, not more than that. The rest can only, in entire page, the rest can only have h2 or h3 for the sake of semantics and screen readers. Okay, let's copy this. This will be basically paragraphs. For now, we can have it wrapped around this div. So paragraph 1, then we will have this as paragraph 2. Let me just copy paste this entire thing. Come and, okay, it will not work. 1 by 1 is fine then. Paragraph 2, we have paragraph 3 like this, and we finally have paragraph 4 like this. Okay, what is the error? Can be escaped with a pause. Okay, so let's see, can be escaped with, let me just do this then. Wherever we have this, let's copy this, go back, and here we are. We have this completely done. So let's style it again. I will make it center one more time. So since this was at 6 and all of that, let's just simply copy paste this whole thing for this container as well, like this. And we can remove this H screen. Okay, that's one. Second, the h2 is basically the same thing here. So I will just copy paste this entire thing. Remember that it is not the styling that we want to change, right? Maybe we can just remove this to 4XL and make this as 5. Okay, and that is fine. It should be a little big, this should be a little small. That is good. Let's also make this as LG for now. Yeah, and we might also have this. Cool. Okay, then we have all these things. So for instance, we can have in this div itself, because there are a bunch of paragraphs, let's say LG, that's one. Then let's say flex goal gap of 2. This is better. Okay, this is fine. Then also have MB of say 4. This space is also better. And finally, in this container, remember the reason why this is not working, this entire thing, because we have wrapped it around the, this container is wrapping this section. But since there's a container here rather than the other way around, so let's also do this. Right, now we'll see the problem. This is like coming here. The reason being that this section does not need to have these. If it does not want, we can just copy this whole thing and we can just paste it like so. And we can do the same for below, right? We can copy the whole thing and we can paste it like so. This will be class name. And then from here, we can remove this. We can remove this, and this should only concern these things. Similarly here, this should only concern this part, which is the height part, and we are good to go. Then we don't need h3 here. I mean the edge here. We also don't need these two here, and this should do the trick. Okay, it is doing the trick. Now we also need this to have text of center, which is also now good. Let's see, in this about we have this as this is a container, so let's have the flex, let's have it as column, let's have it as center because we are using the height. I forgot about that. Let's have it as this, right? Now it is finally at center. Now you can copy this whole thing, go back to this and paste it here as well. Cool. Or maybe we go a little bit more, like in terms of percentage. Let's go with this. This is much better. Let's also copy the entire thing here. Go below in this contact us like this. We can remove these two because we are back to the basic. I mean the colors should be the great ones. Okay, I think this just messed up the entire thing. So I just place this H full in each of them and remove the 96. That's all I have done. Now let's come to this part. We will make sure this is the same here as well for the contact us. There's some problem in the Next.js. We will look into it later because it is pushing this footer right here. Now the thing that we can do is in this layout we have this as flex. Maybe the reason being this is footer is not having the margin top, okay, as auto. Okay, we'll figure this out. For now let's just remove this footer. In this page we will go to the about. What I want here is basically this should be start and this should have an empty of 4. Maybe make it 8. Okay, this can be simply nothing and this is much better. We can have it capitalize or uppercase, which is much better. And this could be Excel. Cool. This can be says this only. Make it 8. Okay, the gap should be say 4 and the text color should be slate of 200, maybe 300. Yeah, this is for working great. And maybe here as well I will say make it as 8. We can also redo the centerpiece here and we can then remove this and that should do it. Okay, what is next? Well, let's also remove this. Yeah, this looks good. Okay, what is next? Well, we need some sort of like a contact form. So for this, let's go to our db.json. Here let's go at the very top, remove the user, make it like this. Let's say contacts or messages, right? And that should do it. So we will go back in our app, in our public, in our page. We will come to the very bottom and here we will have a form. Now the action is something we will come back, but this is what the form will look like. It will have a div which will have a label for name, input of type text, which is going to be name. Remember that you supply the name as a name. When I say this, you have to have this because now we are going to go inside. This form will be using the form server actions rather than anything else. Okay, so this form will use a form server action, which is something that comes later, but for now we'll just make it like that and we will come back to it later. Okay, because we have to focus on these as well. And yeah, okay, so that's the case. Let's also put placeholder as the area should be required, and let's also say required. Okay, let's copy this, paste it below. This time the name should be let's say email. This will be name, not this, and email. Okay, the placeholder can be codedusting.@gmail.com. Fair enough. Then we will have the same thing one more time. This time I will remove this with the text area of message. This has to be simply put into like perspective of 30. The role can be 30. This is basically message. Finally, another div with the button of S, which is submit. Then we will have send message. We will also have something called another div, which will be label, which will be attachments. If the user wants to have some sort of like an attachments, right? Kind of like a file. Basically, it is going to be a file. Let's call it just attachment. I don't want to do the multiple one, and that should do it. Let's go back here. We have this name, email. We have this message, which is this entire message. We have this choose file. We have this submit. Okay. We will design it moving forward. Let's also design our form. To design this, I will go back to my terminal. I will simply halt this and I will say add tailwind typography. That's first thing that I want to, install as a dependency. Then I will have say expect ratio. Let's go to the tailwind doc. Here I will go to tailwind doc, get started, scroll at the very bottom. In the forms, here I will copy this, simply replace it with this. Okay, to use it inside our tailwind config file, let's open that tailwind config file. Inside this plugin, we will simply do this. We will do the same for the other plugins that we install, like this expect ratio and this typography. You don't have to worry like what they are doing, they just require it, and by default it kind of like works. Now our form was quite ugly, so let's see what is the default thing right now. We are going to say concurrently, we are going to simply make this like run, to go back, refresh, and there are some sort of like a default styling, as you can see. Of course, this area is like still a little bit better, but we will style it. There's some sort of like opinionated style that came up, and that's good. Okay, something is completely like going wrong in terms of how the things are starting. Okay, so let me just do this. In PNPM, you can do up /i and -i-l, which can simply upgrade the entire thing. Okay, let me just rerun this entire thing one more time, and let's go and design our form. Now you will notice that the entire page style is kind of like messed up. So we will fix that, as well as we will design our form. So let's go and start doing that. Before we move on to these server actions, a little bit of server actions has to be introduced right about now. Okay, so this is our form, and these are all the labels. I want all of these labels, first of all, to be on top of each other. That means this form should be basically a flex of column, and the gap I want to be of 4. Second, I will need that the label, this label and input should also be on top of each other, like one below the other. Post column again, and this is fine. So let's copy the whole thing one by one, each of them. Third, I want to change this message. So this text area, we will remove this. We will say row should be just 4. This is also fine. And then we have this attachment, which is fine. And then we have this button. So in the button, we will say bg of slate of 950, text of late of 50, px of 4, py of 4, let's call it 3. Want it to be rounded approximately MD, and that should do it. Okay, now this container before the form, let's have a h2 heading, which is going to be the same class that we have above here. So I will just copy paste this right now. We will remove this. We don't want this to be white, and we will say contact us, and that's it. Okay, now let's see what is the problem with this. So we will call it full, and this looks much better. Now we just have to restrict it. For the restriction, I want this to be approximately this 576 WXL. This is good. And MX auto. Cool. This is good. Now let's fix these problems. Like this so much spaces, we have to fix that. So to fix that, we will go to the sections, and I will remove this h full, which is 3, and then it becomes like this. So I will use now the padding instead, padding of 16. Let's go a bit above. Let's see how far we can go. Let's try this. Let's make it 64, a little bit less, 56. Yeah, let it be. Let's go with the 56. Then we will have this as the same, and we will have this as the same. And this is much better. Now let's see why we have this here. Okay, so this is what the padding is doing. Padding bottom, padding top. So maybe, nah, this is fine. This is good to go. Let's also add back our footer, which was giving some sort of an error. Let's see why there was an error. Now it is working fine. Yesterday there was a lot of error there, and this is kind of like a problem because we are not doing any sort of like a mobile responsiveness for now, right? That is also not the focus here, but in the end, if we have the time, we will do that as well. Cool. So this is good to go for now. Let's jump to the server actions because we simply have to file something here, right? For example, our user need to be able to submit some sort of like message to us. So let's see how we can do that, right? So for that, first, let me simply remove everything here, go to this, and this is good. So in our page, we have 3 sections, and this entire page can be a part of just one. There's nothing more going on here. We can also have like different components, so we can just do that as well. For example, hero.tsx, and this is hero, home hero. Let's copy paste this section like this, and we will import this default like so. So now we can just home hero. Second is this about section. So let's create another component here, about.tsx. We'll say home about, and that will be this. We will again go and import our container, and we will export the default. Then we will call it here home about like so. And finally we have this form. Okay, so let's create a component here as well. There's some problem in my shoulders and back pain, back neck pain. So we will have form dot tsx. Let's call it message form, and this will be home message form. This will return back this, and we will export it. Finally we will import it. We can remove this. Now let's go to our form. All right, so this is our form and this is our actions. Right now, the things that we have to do in this particular form is whenever we click on this submit or the send message button, we simply want to perform some action so that our db.json file's message is filled. So basically we simply submit our form. That's exactly what we want to do. In Next.js app router, there's something called server actions, for which in the next config file, we have to type experimental and then server actions and make it true. So now in this action, right, I will say submit message. This is our action. This is basically our function, which is going to be a server action. Now this server action can be defined here as submit message, and let's make it async because we will be awaiting something, right? We will have to submit things either in database or we will call some sort of like an API. Whatever we have to do, we will do it right here inside this function. To make sure that this is a server action and not something that runs on the client end, right? We will have to say use server. And that's about it. Now, anything that we do inside is basically server action. So this action, which is a form, right? In Next.js 13, this will give something called form data, which is of type form data. This is something that Next is doing. It is not usually the case that happens in other frameworks. It is the case that you can, using JavaScript, you can have form data in HTML and CSS, but this is what the Next.js is providing. In short, basically, there's a function that will run, which will provide you the form data, and that can then be utilized here. What we are doing is that when we say submit message, then the submit message gets this form data by default. This is plain JavaScript. I hope you understand how the function and all of that passes within the JavaScript. Okay. So then this form data will help us get the name data from our form. So we have name of email, name of attachment, name of message, and that's about it. So let's get all of those, right? So we will say name, and that is basically await, the form data get name, that's one. You will see that it is of type form data entry value and or null. So I will just say it is string. Now the same goes for email, form data get email as string. Then we will have image or attachment of form data get attachment like this. For that I will have message form data get message as string. This will be as unknown as file. We want it as a file because this is a file. Okay, when we do this, we can actually do a lot of things like how the entire file system works here. Okay, so then we might want to do something with this attachment, right? The file that we are getting, we have to make sure that this is uploaded in our images section. So let's create a folder. We can call it messages, right? And that's where we will be uploading our file. And then from there, in this db.json, we will only be mentioning the URL of that file, which will be served from our server itself. Okay, so we have this. Now let's upload this file. So for that, we will have something called bytes, and bytes will be from the attachment. We will get the array buffer. This is node.js. Okay, and then we will have buffer using buffer. This is node.js function from bytes. Okay, it says yeah, so we will have this and we will get the buffer. Now with the buffer, we can actually write it anywhere we want. So I will say try, and this will be catch. This will be console.error as error, and we can also return it like error as error if we want. Then here in this try one, we will await write file with this promises, and we will write the file path followed by this, the data, which is buffer. For the path, we will say join, which is another one of the node.js function. Join, we will say process.cwd, another one of the node.js function. Again, if you don't know the node.js part, just think of it as in passing. It's not much of a deal. This basically will give you this directory, NextJS course or crash course, and then we are going to say go inside the public folder, then go inside the images folder, and go inside the messages folder, and then simply whatever the name of the file is, which is going to be attachment dot name. This is the file name, that whatever the file we submit, that is the name here that will come, and this will be the path. So it will write it there and we will get something here. If that is not the case, the entire thing will fail. Okay, and then once we have written this whole thing, we can do things here in itself. So for instance, we can again say await fetch, then we are going to be fetching it from using the process.env.this. We want the fetch request to go towards the messages, and then we are going to say the method is that of post. The headers is basically of content type application/json, and finally the body is going to be the json.stringify, and then we can pass the name, the email, the messages, and finally the attachment, and this will be URL, and let's call it like this, and this will be slash, because we know where we are actually putting the things, images/messages, right? /images/messages/ the name of the file, and this will be like so, and this will be the backtick. So let's test it out whether it is even working or not. If everything works fine, we should have something going on here, and we should have something here. Okay, let's test this thing out. So I will install Faker Chrome extension. Okay, let's refresh. Here I will stick it, then click on it, and as you can see, everything is now filled. So let's choose a file, and let's for now choose this attachment. Now open this inspect element. Let's go to network tab. Let's click on this send message, and it says it is perfect, right? It went where it has to go, And at the end in the payload, we have this form data. Now, this is added by Next.js. This is the name. This is the email. This is the message. The attachment, as you can see, is a binary attachment. That's why we created the buffer from it. And this is something that Next.js does. Now, here's the thing. For us, we are writing as if there's no fetch API request call. But for Next.js internally, it is going to still make a fetch request call. As you can see, it is making a fetch request call. And this is a little bit different than the fetch request call that we have, by the way. Why? Because if you do it with the normal DB as well, like Postgres or Firebase, whatever, right? And you don't call explicitly this fetch request, it will still make this. Now, if I go here, this says the post messages has been hit. This is our fetch request. The fetch request that we made is this one, not the browser one. This is the Next.js one. This is ours, the one we wrote. So if we go back here we see that yes, we have a message, and here we have the image. So it just worked, and this whole thing happened on the server. To prove to you that it is happening on the server, I will go back to this message form. I will, inside this, I will write something server form action. Okay. Now let's go to the console. Let's hit this one more time. There's nothing here, no console, but here it says server form action. So that means it ran there only. Now here I will again open this db.json, and you will find it is here one more time. Okay. So what will happen if I remove this from here, right? Now it says all of a sudden there's a error. Functions cannot be passed directly to the client components unless you explicitly expose it by marking it with useServer. So previously this does not used to happen, but now in 13.5 there's an error mechanism that they have built. Of course, the error message is not good enough to make you understand why that is happening, but you can guess that unless and until there's no useServer, you cannot have a function that can act as a server action. So this is our message form that is done. But there's a problem that you can already see, and that is we can still do the same thing. So the problem here is that when I click on this message, I don't get any response back, even though everything is now working, right? But I don't get any response back. Not to mention, I want, once the response is here, I simply want to, remove every data from this particular page. So how to do that? What we can do is we can make this entire message form as client component. Oh wait, but then what happens to the server actions? Well, we can still use that in the client component as well, only we cannot use it inside the client component. So here's what we will do. I will create in the src folder called actions, and within that I will have message form submit.ts, and then I will simply copy paste this here. I will export this action. Then since this is a completely new file in itself, I can use this useServer at the very top. Let's also go back here and simply cut these two and paste it here. So now it is fine. This entire action is in its own file separate from message form, and then we can simply get this entire thing which is like message form. Let's call it contact because it is not going to be the message form. So let's call it home contact. We are simply renaming, nothing else. For better nomenclature, we are simply renaming the thing, and this will be home contact. Okay, now here we will copy this, cut this. Then we will create client message form. Then we will say client message form. You don't have to write the client every time. I'm just writing it so that it is understandable what is happening here. And then we will simply export this, and we will come down here. We will export this. So use client makes this component a client component, right? And within that client component, we are calling a server action from different page itself. Client component, client form, like this. We can just call it so. Basically, right here in our actions, This is our server action, which is going to run on the server itself, not on the client. So to prove one more time, we will call it server action. Okay, this is our client form now, but since it's a client form now, we can use something called ref. So for the ref, let's call it form ref. We can say use ref. We will call it null, and this will be HTML form element. Okay, then here we will say the form is basically this form ref. Then remember what I mentioned in previously, that this is basically a function which has this form data, and then we can say the ref dot current dot clear. We have to, let's see why it is not working. Oh yeah, we have to say form ref dot current dot, I think I forgot the function, let's see, reset, and then we will await that function that we had above, submit message, where we will pass this form data one more time. And let's make this as async. So this is basically our function, right? Basic function that we always had. We can also say this is form data. So now what will happen is the moment we submit this form, first this will run. So the entire form will get cleared, and then this entire thing will be submitted as well. So let's check this out. Notice that nothing has changed. We will make it as Ali Bhutan, and then we will say this user 11 now this time. Okay, user 11. The moment I send, let's also go here, preserve the log, clear everything, no throttle to slow 3G. The moment I click on this, everything just reset. And now this is like submitted as well. So if I go here, we have this image, Ali Bhutan or Bhutan, and we also have these two right here. So let me delete this, and also delete these. Okay, so that is how you use the server actions within the client component. Now you might be having some sort of like a confusion, as in what exactly changed here. Well, first of all, the change happened in terms of the fact that we need interactive forms in modern HTML or modern data development, right? So for that we require the use ref, and this hook can only be used in the client component so that we can clear the form as soon as the submission happens. Because remember, our page is not loading like it used to, so we require this. Remember that our page does not load even in the server action scenario or server component scenario, right? So the form does not get cleared. So for that we require this hack or this mechanism or this pattern. Okay, second thing is, if I go back to this, I can disable the JavaScript. Okay, and then I can reload the entire page. Now let's see whether this will work one more time or not. Right now there is no JavaScript that is happening in our page. See, the entire JavaScript is disabled. So I click on this. As you can see, the ref is not working because there is no JavaScript, right? But let's see whether this worked or not. Nothing worked. Okay, so this is something that we will use if we convert our form to use client. And if we don't, right, if we do this, and for that we simply have to remove this. Let's see, it will give us the error. We have to refresh. It will give us the error, pretty sure about it, right? So since we are not using the JavaScript, let's remove this. Let's also remove this for now. Let's remove this for now as well. Okay, so now this still became the server form itself. So I mean, even though we have named it like this, this is again back to the original server form or the server component with the server actions. So let's refresh it again. This time it should work. Right, so now it is actually thinking that this entire thing is a function. For example, it is thinking that here it requires our use server one more time. So what I will do is I will make sure that this whole thing is now commented out. I will say action as submit message itself, and that's about it. Then I will refresh, and now it is working fine. Okay, we are on slow 3G, so that's why it is like taking some time, but it is working now. And this is, remember, there's no JavaScript still. When we convert our component to the client component, right, this will not work. This progressive enhancement that I'm about to show you will not work. So progressive enhancement is nothing but the ability of the component to work without JavaScript, and once the JavaScript loads, it progressively enhances that particular component to behave in a way that JavaScript should behave. That component should behave under the influence of JavaScript. Till then, it is going to behave as the web browser wants it to behave. So for our purpose, the form basically behaves the moment we click on submit or submit action in any HTML form. The browser behavior is send the request, then reload the entire page. That's it. So let's send this, and the moment this is sent, this reloaded. Okay, and because this reloaded, this form automatically gets cleared. This is not happening and the JavaScript is enabled even when we have the server component plus server actions. So that's why we move towards the client component and server actions. Okay, if we go here, you will see that here it is. All right, so let's revert back this whole thing to the client component, because that's usually what most people will be doing anyways, right? Because this is not the only thing that most people want, the clearing of the form. The next thing that most people will like to do is that when the user click on the button, they want to show some sort of like a change in the button, that the action is happening somewhere. So for that, we have another hook in React called useTransition. Okay, that will give us two things. One is pending, so we will call it as is pending, followed by it will give us something called start transition, which is basically a function that we will have to use this. Okay, so now that this is the case, here first we will say that if this entire thing is pending, right, then change the message to sending message, otherwise make it like this. Okay, if we are still submitting, make it sending message. Now to catch whether this is pending or not, we have to wrap our server action is submit message in this start transition. So we will say start the transition, right, like this, and this should be a function that will do this. We have to wrap this. So we are sending this entire thing, like this server action, we are doing it inside this transition, start transition, which is coming from useTransitionHook. And let's see how it actually behaves now. All of these are still in kind of like, they are still experimental technologies in both of them. So maybe it will not work as I expect, but let's see. So the thought process is that when I click on submit, there should be some sort of like sending message. See, it just happened. There was a short message that happened all of a sudden. So let's go back to network, throttle it to slow 3G, fill this again and click. You see, sending message. The moment that is done, it reverts back. Cool. So this is the interactivity that you can gain from making your form as a client form, client component, and still using the server actions. So you can use that.